Welcome back on Buckeyes Now on SI and our continuing coverage of the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'm Brendan Gulick, along with Brett Hiltbrand from Fox Sports Ohio, and a longtime Ohio State media guy. He's covered Ohio State for lots of different outlets, lots of different places, and we're glad to use his knowledge and his skill set here on our podcast here this afternoon. Boy, there's an awful lot to get to right now. It's February 2nd. Kind of hard to believe that it's already February 2nd. January went in the blink of an eye. 1 month and 1 day ago, we were talking about an Ohio State clobbering of Clemson on New Year's Day, and there's all this hype around the national championship game is coming up, and obviously that didn't go quite the way that the Buckeyes had hoped. But this month has been full of, frankly, lots of things to talk about, which is always fun, Brett, because you never really know what the offseason is going to hold for football, and obviously on the basketball court, the team continues to play well. So it's been fun lately.
It has, for sure. This is going to, I usually hesitate to say things that make it sound like I'm old because I don't think I am. And I don't think I may have the years under my belt to stare wistfully in the past and long for the good old days. But it does feel like there's never an off season. Or if there is an off season in college football, it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter every single year. And January was usually when all the college football guys go on vacation. If you see them, they're in Cabo or wherever. That's not the case anymore. And obviously extending into January with the college football playoff helps a little bit, but it's. Once that last game happens, you turn the page over to football with early enrolling. You have another kind of set of a week or two of stories to get to. There is virtually no off season in college football, and I know some people who like that, and that's good for them. Every once in a while, a break would be good for me.
Compression time, yeah.
Pump the brakes a little bit, perhaps. But it's always fun to talk about it year round, no doubt.
Well, maybe we'll start with basketball today because I certainly want to give the proper credence to what the Buckeyes have done on the basketball floor here in the month of January. Now that it's wrapped up, they opened January with probably their only bad loss of the season. They just flat out didn't play very well against Minnesota and got beat pretty handily. But boy, ever since then, despite the adversity that the team has gone through, they've played really, really good basketball. Winning 6 of their last 7 games, and the only loss in that stretch was a Jaden Ivey, 3-ball with a couple seconds left to beat Ohio State in the Purdue game. Other than that, they've had 3 wins on the road against top 15 teams. They followed it up with a throttling of Michigan State in their last contest on Sunday, which was kind of nice to see. That really hasn't happened a whole lot. God bless you. It certainly hasn't happened a whole lot lately. Man, I am really, really impressed with the way this team continues to grow. And frankly, I don't know about you. I guess I'm a little bit surprised offensively how efficient they've been, because at the beginning of the year, I'm just not sure I saw the offense going this way.
The shots are going in, and that lends itself to a lot of good things. You're going to win a lot of basketball games, when you're filling it up. And I think the efficiency numbers are a big reason why. If you go back and I think you look at those losses, I think all but one, they're shooting under 40%. And so you could draw a pretty clear line in the sand that if you're shooting it well, you're winning. And if you're not, you're probably not getting it done. But I think if you peel back that layer even more, I think it speaks to the kind of the culture change that we've seen that we've seen kind of incrementally take hold every single year. It increases a little bit more under Chris Holtmann, that there's a confidence on the offensive end of the floor that radiates to everyone. It's not just the go-to guys. It's 6, 7, 8 deep into the bench, 9 deep into the bench. Everyone feels like they can contribute, and everyone feels like that maybe even those like tweener shots that aren't maybe necessarily great shots or good shots, but aren't bad ones either. Those ones are going in right now too. So the confidence, the efficiency is really, really good for Ohio State, and I think that is that's one of those things that when it's good and you know it's going well, that you just ride that train as long as you possibly can, because the basketball gods will right that ship as quickly and whenever they want to. But when you're confident and maybe things aren't going your way, you still have a bit of ability to grind out wins and get results. And so I think that's, if you're Chris Holtmann, that's all you're asking for right now. Is you're doing it right, you're playing really well, but you're also seeing you're closing out halves well, with the exception of maybe that Penn State first half. You're closing out halves in a great way. You're finishing runs. You're getting 3 straight stops. Those are things that I think if you're peeling a layer or two back, that Chris Holtmann and his coaching staff are loving to see.
Yeah, the end of that Penn State first half was a little sloppy, and it was especially not great if you had a wager on the game. I actually saw it last night on Scott Van Pelt's Bad Beats, which is the best segment on SportsCenter, in my opinion, ever. I think it's hilarious. They have so much fun with it. But the end of that game, if you got caught on the wrong side of the line, it was bad news bears.
I had a conversation with Stanford Steve a couple of years ago. Sorry for name dropping here, but I'll do it one time today and to tell this story. I had a conversation with Stanford Steve at the Pittsburgh Steelers training camp in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, a couple of years ago about bad beats. And I was like, I feel like it's counterintuitive at times, right? You're showing all these reasons not to gamble. and yet everyone's tuning in and firing off money into the ether to maybe experience one of those. Rule number 1: never bet first halves. Never, ever in college basketball. That if you're into that sort of thing, and the old Musburger wink, never bet first halves.
Yeah, not a good idea for sure.
No.
Let's talk Iowa, right? I mean, this Thursday night we've got, I think you could definitively say, the biggest test of the season for Ohio State so far. And the thing that, the Big Ten presents such an interesting challenge, right? Because you'd think a team like Penn State, coming off of, a COVID break and not really having any rhythm, it really is a matchup thing. And when you get caught against a team that matches up well against you, it can be difficult, right? That said, from a talent perspective, I think Iowa is the most talented team that Ohio State's played against this year. The Buckeyes have certainly seen some good teams, that's for sure. But obviously Luka Garza is going to take a lot of the headlines, but Iowa's got some great guard play. They can really shoot it. And frankly, they've stubbed their toe here recently with 2 losses that I think aren't sitting well with them. Not saying that losing to Indiana and Illinois is a bad thing, but I don't think that's what the Hawkeyes' expectations were. I'm friends with a couple of guys who went to Iowa, and their expectations at the beginning of the year were, hey, this is a Final Four team. Last night, one of them told me he doesn't think that might be the case anymore, starting to feel like maybe the bottom's falling out a little bit. So I don't know if they're panicking in Iowa City or not. They're certainly talented enough to win just about every game that they play. But boy, Ohio State's got to be at the top of their game, or else Thursday could be a long night.
And it's also, you love to see the Iowa games because you have one eye on the court and the other eye on Fran McCaffrey, wondering what crazy thing he's going to do and sure, the antics that come from that. So that was always my favorite game to be shooting, with a camera on the end line for, because knowing Fran's reputation, and if you follow college hoops and Big Ten hoops, you're certainly well aware of it. That it was must see, like, irrational competitiveness, and it was always good stuff. He's never failed to disappoint in any regard, and I would guess that'll be turned up, to 11, even more for most, or even more for him, to the nth degree in this game, simply because I think he has the best team he's had maybe ever. And I watched their game back in December when they got in a scoring contest with Gonzaga, when the Zags were clearly the consensus number 1 team in the country, and really held their own with them. I think they got beat by maybe 10 or 11.
Yeah, it was a decent
game. They scored 87, 88 points, and Gonzaga got up into the 90s. So, you know that there's that potential. They've gotten to 100 points this year a couple different times against good teams. They match up really well against Ohio State. It's just going to be to me. It's like it's one of those appointment kind of type of games, right? That you kind of you know it's happening. It's in the schedule. It's in the calendar, and you're excited to watch. And I think if you add like an Iowa kind of to the cocktail of the greater Big Ten basketball, if the Michigan States, are what you expect them to be year in and year out, Michigan starts to play well and does nice things, and then Ohio State and Iowa, I think, are maybe in that next tier down. If those two programs start to kind of raise their collective efforts, Big Ten basketball is in a good position. And so I definitely think it's a game that if you're an Ohio State nut job and you've watched every single game so far, you're obviously tuning into that one, and that's fine. If you're maybe on the fringes a little bit and you're not necessarily tuning in game out, this is the one to watch, because this is the game that will find out really how good this Ohio State team is.
Yeah, I agree. And, for as tough as the schedule's been lately, I think Ohio State's hitting a point now where it's gonna uptick significantly because as you enter the month of February, you've got Iowa twice. You've still got to play Michigan, assuming that they can get healthy enough to play. You're going to see Michigan State a second time around. And I have a really hard time believing that Michigan State, when they play them again on February 25th, is going to look as poor as they did on Sunday. I assuming they can stay healthy and continue to play consistently and deal with the pandemic.
And don't forget about Illinois too, right? Like, Illinois is an excellent team. And I think Brad Underwood, I would put Brad Underwood in that top tier of college basketball coaches throughout the entire country. He is unbelievably good.
Yeah, I mean, there's no break in the schedule. And that's the Big Ten this year, right? The Big Ten is right now with the Big 12, I think. And the Big East has had a decent year, but not quite as strong as usual. The Big Ten and the Big 12 are probably the two best leagues in the country right now. And the argument might be that the Big 12 has, a higher ceiling. They've got more teams that are ranked higher, but the Big Ten as a league, I think, is deeper. And Chris Holtmann said it a bunch of times. Yeah. He thinks this is the deepest that league has ever been. So Thursday night's game against Iowa is definitely a marquee matchup. And now it's turned into number 7 versus number 8 with the AP poll that just came out. While we're talking about Chris Holtmann, let's topic shift a little bit here. What do you think on the whole, or even just most recently, the most impressive thing that he and his staff have done this year, considering what they've accomplished so far, 14-4, and kind of the stretch they're coming off of here in January?
I would say it's probably the most impressive thing I think they've done is understanding personnel and understanding how certain matchups trend in their favor. And I think it's you come to that understanding a couple different ways. One of which I think is something that is increasingly rare in coaching. You have to have a certain sense of humility, I think, as a coaching staff, to understand that certain maybe ways to attack teams are maybe not in your best interest, given how you maybe have been playing or trending in a certain way over the last couple weeks or whatever. But it also means that you have an extremely keen sense and awareness of certain guys in your team, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and then how you can accentuate and support those strengths. And that is something that we've seen bits and pieces and flashes of from Chris Holtmann coach teams for a long time now, even back, at his time at Butler. And then I would even make the case you could go back even further, Gardner-Webb, that was something that they were really good at. That they had their core group and they knew who their go-to guys were, but those guys, they could put them in positions, different games, depending on the matchup, in positions to succeed. And so we're seeing that now at a really high level, a consistent level with Ohio State. And that's been absolutely massive for this team. That's not necessarily depending upon one guy, like a Keita Bates Diop, for example, to go out and get you, 25 plus points. Now it's like, hey, we know that we have a couple matchups that we like, and we're going to go to those over and over and over again and get results.
I think to that point, the ability to navigate through this point guard, challenge they've had this year, where
That's the best example of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, CJ Walker misses 4 games. And even when he comes back, he's playing regularly, but he's not at the same level that I think he expects, or really that he flashed last year. And combine it with the fact that in the first game that he misses, Jimmy Sotos dives for a loose ball at midcourt with a handful of seconds left in the Rutgers game, and he messes up his shoulder, and he's missed 6 or 7 games now, whatever it is. So all of a sudden, Michi Johnson, who they basically had to convince to early enroll at Ohio State after Michi
should be in high school right now.
Well, yeah, and originally Michi said, "No, I'm going to play high school basketball." And then decided, okay, I'll come. Boy, what a blessing to have him now. But again, to your point, understanding that Justice Suing, who wasn't a point guard and was playing in the Pac-12 in a league that is far less physical than the Big Ten, to have last year to basically be on the bench and learn the team and be around because he chose to transfer. And now this year he's thrust into a role that there's no way he saw coming when he came here. And frankly, I think Justice has played pretty well. It hasn't been perfect, but man, for a guy to run the offense the way he's done it, I've been pretty impressed with him. Dwayne Washington's been okay. He has his games where you watch him and think, okay, wow, this guy can really, really light it up. But boy, the last 3 games offensively, not good. I mean, he's 5 for his last 30 shooting the ball. And frankly, it feels like 5 for his last 300. There's just times he shoots the ball and you're like, nope, that's not going in. And it's not a knock against him. I know he works hard. I know Chris Holtmann loves the guy, but it was pretty straightforward. He said he's going to kill me. He's turning my hair gray.
Send him to an early death. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the exact verbiage.
Uh-huh. I would say he's the only guy on that team that presses at times.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think that's because he and EJ Liddell are probably the 2 guys that Chris Holtmann has laid an expectation for them to go and hunt shots. And I think it's easier if you're a big to do that at times, because it's okay for you to hunt a shot with your back to the basket. It's a little bit harder, I think, when you're a guard, given the lack of space on the floor, and you have a tendency to go further out from the hoop to maybe try and find someone and then hope you throw a couple in. But like, I think it's interesting too, the ebbs and flows of how Dwayne's maybe ups and downs have not trended or affected the rest of the team. Despite his maybe cold shooting touch, the rest of the team is really shooting exceptionally well. And I think that kind of speaks to what I was saying earlier about, having Chris Holtmann and the coaching staff having a really good finger on the pulse of this team, knowing that they're able to coach up those guys individually and say, yeah, like even if he's down, we can still collectively pick him up. And that's huge. That's huge. Because how many times have we seen college basketball teams during the regular season have these guys, these go-to guys, and they go and they play really well. They have huge stats, and they get to the tournament, and all of a sudden it just doesn't happen. And then you're 4, 5, 6 guys, on the scoring, kind of tally, or in the stat sheet, can't go out and find it because they were never asked to at any point during the regular season. That's not something that this Ohio State team is going to have to deal with, and that'll suit them, in a massively positive way come tournament time.
Dwayne Washington on the year is 14.5 per game. But again, the last 3 games, he's just 5 of 30 from the floor. But I will give him a lot of credit for his pretty impressive free throw shooting numbers. He's at 90% on the year, 54 out of 60. And believe it or not, that's the second best on the team. CJ Walker has missed 1 free throw, 49 of 50. He's 98%, one of the top couple free throw shooters in the country.
And if I was Chris Holtmann, I guarantee he's doing this. I would be telling Dwayne to to get to the line as much as humanly possible and almost be looking for some of that contact, because it's like, okay, yeah, maybe you're not shooting it super well from three. Maybe you're not getting as clean a looks as you would like, to really kind of feel like you're setting a foundation then to go forward into February. Let's get you to the line where we know you're exceptionally efficient, and let that boost our confidence, and hope that kind of trickles out to some of the other parts of scoring.
Yeah, he's played 18 games and he's shot 60 free throw attempts. So we're talking roughly 3 foul shots on average per game, right? That's for somebody
that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine, but if you can get that to 4, 5, or 6 a game here in the second half of the season, with the way he efficiently scores, you're going to steal some points. So
yeah, exactly.
I agree with that for sure. Before we flip off of basketball, I guess I want to think big picture here. NCAA tournament, the Big Ten tournament is likely moving from Chicago to Indianapolis. The conference hasn't announced it yet, but there was a report in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel that said that Wisconsin athletic director Barry Alvarez was telling his athletics board that was probably going to be the case. So the Buckeyes pretty much know that their postseason home is likely going to be fairly close to their own home. And regardless of how things go in the Big Ten tournament, I don't know if I see a scenario at this point with what they've accomplished that Ohio State doesn't make the NCAA tournament. And if the tournament started today, they'd probably be a 2 or 3 seed. So let's pontificate a little bit here. How far do you think this team can go in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah. I swear sometimes I'm the absolute goat of hedging your bets. No one can be more wishy-washy in the sports talk debate than me at times. I think this is at their absolute best. This is an Elite Eight type team. I think the scoring efficiency is massive. The ability to ask some of your more quote unquote role players to go out and get you points is what suits you come tournament time, if your stars are able to go out and kind of do what they do. But I also think if you are going to make that deep tournament run, Ohio State has to get a better region than they've maybe gotten in the tournament in the last couple of years. Yeah, going out to Boise isn't going to do it.
Yeah.
And so I think a little love from the bracketology folks would maybe do them some good.
And remember, this year too, it's not so much about location, because basically all these games are being played in a neutral site environment in Indiana, but it's certainly going to depend on who they play.
Yeah, and so I think that bodes well. Like that bubble mentality kind of bodes well for Ohio State. Because I do wonder about how some of that travel would affect this team specifically. But I think all the pieces are there. You just got to make it happen, and then hopefully you get a couple good matchups, in the tournament. And I think that really depends, on kind of how the luck of the draw, comes about. I think that really, in some ways, makes this NCAA tournament and this whole kind of college basketball season so exciting, is because we don't necessarily have that, those really clear, really good teams, that collection of 4 or 5 teams that we know are really, really good. That this tournament feels a lot more wide open maybe than years past, with the exception of maybe that Gonzaga team. So I think it's probably, in my opinion, I would say it's a second weekend or bust. I would say that's bare minimum expectation for Chris Holtmann and the coaching staff. I think they could win one more, and then anything after that would obviously be playing with house money.
Yeah, I would not have said at the beginning of the year, after watching the first 7 or 8 games, I don't think I would have said that this is a Sweet 16 type team.
Same. Yeah. Same.
But offensively, they've grown a lot. And to your point you made maybe 10 minutes ago, man, their ability to go deep into the bench and not feel like they're losing much. I think that's one of Chris Holtmann's best traits. He gets the best out of every player on that team. And it doesn't matter if it's Musa Jallo, who's kind of had his minutes squeezed a little bit lately, but he practiced really, really hard last week, and they put him in a big situation, and because they said he earned it and he played well. I just think this staff, and I don't want to short the assistant coaches either, but I just get the impression that this staff is really good at getting the best out of this talent and getting this team to just play hard. I think it was Coach Underwood that said earlier this year he thought Ohio State played the toughest of any team in the conference. I have a hard time disagreeing with that. And that doesn't mean that Ohio State's going to win every game. They are certainly undersized when basically your tallest player that sees the floor regularly is E.J. Liddell at 6'8". Unfortunately, Ibrahima Diallo really hasn't even had a chance to play much this year. They're just gritty. They just don't give up points easily. And again, the offensive efficiency, when you're averaging 1 point per possession, that's considered pretty good. If you're at 1.1 or higher on the offensive end, points per possession, that's elite. And we've seen a few games in January where Ohio State's been at 1.1 or higher. And it's really hard to lose games when you're that efficient on the offensive end. Again, I didn't really see that early in the year. And so I definitely think that this is a team capable of making a Sweet 16 run. And then I think it just comes down to matchups because I'm not convinced Purdue is that good, but they're not a good matchup for Ohio State. Travion Williams is tough. And the 7'3" freshman that they have, I forget his last name at the moment, Zach something, Eden, I think maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Those kids ate up Ohio State in the paint. Ohio State's going to struggle a little bit against some really big, tall teams. I think we're going to learn a lot when they play Luka Garza here this week. I think we're going to learn a lot when they play Michigan because Michigan's got a great post presence. Michigan's really, really good. But I definitely think the Buckeyes are capable of playing the second weekend of the tournament. Beyond that, it's going to depend on matchups. But are they capable of making a run? Early in the year, I'm not sure I would have said yes. Now I think they can. So could be fun.
Yeah, and it will be fun. I think if the one kind of prerequisite I would throw out come tournament time is they have to score in the 70s. If there's a game in the 60s, that does not suit Ohio State well. 70s or better is probably more their style. If you get into the 80s, if you're getting into the mid to high 70s and 80s, I would guess that means Ohio State is shooting the ball really well and the efficiency's out, kind of through the roof. The more the points are scored, quote unquote, in a game, I think it suits Ohio State better because then you're not necessarily grinding out possessions, and that means you're dealing well with length and you're getting the best possible looks you could possibly, the best possible looks that you could have. So I would say if there's a target score, it's probably 75 to 78. You're trying to get plus of that. Maybe even say 72. But I would say if you're looking for that 75-point mark, and if you're Chris Holtmann and company, you're feeling pretty comfortable if that's the number you're hitting.
Well, they're certainly going to need to put up some points against Iowa. And by the way, Iowa plays Michigan State tonight before they play the Buckeyes on Thursday. So we'll certainly keep our eye on that one. But, Iowa's scoring almost 90 points a game. They're the number 2 scoring offense in the country. So Ohio State's going to have to find a way to put up some points against them. That's for sure. All right, maybe let's flip to the football side. We've talked certainly quite a bit of the basketball. Let's see. Why don't we go to how about the Senior Bowl? So Senior Bowl was just this past weekend. Ohio State had 4 guys that played in the Senior Bowl, all on the defensive side of the ball, and frankly, they were all pretty impressive. All 4 of them made really good plays. I think all four of them helped their cause. There were some guys in the game that I think kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit, but I mean, you heard the names: Baron Browning, Justin Hilliard, Tuff Borland, Jonathan Cooper often throughout the broadcast. And I think that's a testament to, having four veteran dudes that really played and trained hard and were great leaders at Ohio State. I'm encouraged by what they did this week, and I'm excited to see how it shakes out for them now as we get into the heart of the draft prep process.
It was super inspiring to me to see Justin Hilliard out there and getting the opportunity to really showcase his ability, given all the unbelievable adversity that guy had to go through during his 2-decade career at Ohio State. That was like, you want to talk about a guy that it was impossible to ignore him and like not root for him. Like he just, it was like one thing after another, and then he just kept working. And I really hope that he gets an opportunity to show off ability, but also to in the NFL, but also to have a little bit of room to kind of feel his way through it. Because I think he's one of those guys that can make an impact for sure. And I just would love to see him have, a steady NFL career, because I think that's the least he deserves, given his story to this point. So seeing him in the Senior Bowl was super rewarding and inspiring to me. Baron Browning's Ohio, I think we're good 10 years from now. We're going to look back on Baron Browning and wonder, he'll be one of the great enigmas in some ways, I think, in Ohio State football history, as far as a guy who came in with the highest level of expectations you could probably have. Everybody, it never ceased to amaze me how many people were like, yeah, but this Baron Browning kid is coming in, and he never really met maybe the hype, and perhaps the hype was too high and too hot for him coming in. I'm so curious to see what he does in the NFL, because you want to talk about a guy whose ceiling is absolutely sky high.
Oh, he's a monster.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see, because I'm not entirely sure you could say he maxed his potential at Ohio State during his career. I think that's probably fair. I'm really curious to see if he's maybe able to do that, when he's getting paid for it. And I think I'm extremely eager to see what he does in the NFL, and if he's able to catch on and make a career out of it.
Well, Baron Browning is probably the fastest of the linebackers that Ohio State had this year. And if you can't move all directions quickly in the NFL as a linebacker, you're not going to play. I think the one of the more notable differences between the college game and the professional game is the speed at linebacker. In the college game, sometimes you have backs and receivers or quarterbacks that could outrun linebackers. In the NFL, it's harder to do that. And that's where I think Tuff Borland could struggle a little bit. Tuff does everything well, except he's just not the most gifted, when it comes to running. And he made that comment to the NFL scouts that were in person in Mobile this week and said, look, I'm going to make up for that with my preparation. I can't cover Juju Smith-Schuster in the slot, but I'm gonna be prepared enough to be able to anticipate my way, to make up for what I won't have in speed. And that's great. And I'm glad he's going to do that. And I think he could have a successful career as a pro for sure. But I think Baron Browning has been really, really impressive in this past year. The position change he made within Ohio State, I think, has shown some versatility. I think he's got a chance to have a huge, huge career, and I'm looking forward to following him for sure. But we really haven't talked much about Jonathan Cooper yet. And, Jonathan Cooper, you talk about the story that Justin Hilliard has, and frankly, Jonathan Cooper's journey at Ohio State in some ways has been similar because it's been, a long road for him injury wise. He is so well respected in the Ohio State football community. The Block O jersey, I think, was such a perfect thing to give him to be the first person to wear, because he represents everything that's good about Ohio State football. And I'm really excited for what his prospect looks like this year, because I'm not sure his draft prospect would have been nearly as high if he didn't come back for this past season. And I thought Coop played an unbelievably good year in 2020 and had a good showing at the Senior Bowl.
100% agree about the necessity of him coming back. We've had the opportunity to watch Jonathan Cooper, since he was 12, 13 years old in Gahanna. You want to talk about a guy who worked, and Bruce Ward, who's the head coach at Gahanna Lincoln High School, one of the suburbs of Columbus, really got in there and was like, hey man, you could go anywhere, but you have to do X, Y, Z to get there. And he did that in spades. Came in as a 5-star, depending on, the rankings and wherever you might look for that. And I think we probably talk about Jonathan Cooper differently if there isn't a Nick Bosa and Chase Young kind of in front of him / alongside him. Even Draymond Jones, I think is another guy. We probably talk about him differently if we're able to showcase Jonathan Cooper without maybe the lights being shown super bright among those other guys. But I think it's, in some ways, he's a lot like Baron Browning, right? That there is NFL potential there. You just got to get in the right system. And I think you got to catch on with the right coaching staff. And there's some consistency there that he probably needs. But he's another guy I think that could absolutely positively catch on and make a career out of it. But it's got to be kind of the right fit. But that's the least he deserves, given everything that he did at Ohio State and the amount of work that he put in. And so, you would, in the same way that I think we're looking at Justin Hilliard and all these guys, really, that you're wishing them the best. But I think it's especially true for guys like Jonathan Cooper, that you really hope that they can make it happen.
And how about guys beyond the 4 that played within the confines of the Senior Bowl? You had lots of guys that turned down invites. Trey Sermon was actually in Mobile, but chose not to play because he's still recovering from that shoulder injury. Obviously Justin Fields is getting an awful lot of hype, and he should, right? He's probably going to be a top half of the first-round draft pick, and we can get into that a little bit here in just a bit. But somebody like Pete Werner, Pete did not go to the Senior Bowl. He declined an invitation. And I think Pete Werner was probably the most accomplished linebacker on the field this year. I love the way he defended the run. I love the way he played in coverage this year. Pete Werner's a dude. I mean, he was outstanding this season. And there's no doubt in my mind that he increased his draft stock for sure. Obviously didn't have a chance to showcase that, but there are a number of guys that are, turning pro here. And I think the Buckeyes have a chance to have as many as 8, 9, 10 guys drafted in April.
I agree. I think Pete's an intriguing one, because Pete was asked to do something a little bit extra at linebacker at Ohio State. And that was maybe to help cover up a little bit of Tuff Borland's movement deficiencies. And I think we especially saw that this past season, where it looked like he was maybe doing at times 1.5 jobs at once, rather than just a singular sole responsibility play in and play out. I think Pete's speed is actually underrated. I would guess that if you put him in a race with Baron Browning or any of those guys, Pete's probably step for step with him. And I think is one of those guys that it's probably a question mark a little bit at the next level. But it's also kind of an exciting one, too, right? Like, I think it's an opportunity for him, and and he just kind of has to seize it and get the right fit. But I beyond him, that I think there are the Shaun Wade conversation is an interesting one, in that Shaun Wade, probably a first round talent if he comes out last year after this, the 2019 season, comes back for 2020 and does not have a great year. I wonder about that one.
How much do you think that is him changing positions, going from inside to outside corner, and having such a off season? There was nothing normal about the training process and preparation process for him to change positions. I agree with you. I don't think he had a great year. I thought he had good moments, but I thought he was on the wrong side of the equation most of the time. And you can't coach size, you can't coach speed. He certainly has some of those things, but man, there were times his coverage was not great.
This is the part of this conversation that I find to be fascinating, is how much do you pay attention to tape as opposed to potential, and when you're evaluating players, and how do you look at good tape versus bad tape, and how do you then weigh that against like potential and flashes of brilliance per se. Shaun Wade is maybe a cautionary tale going forward. I think that, Jim Tressel always said, if your potential is in the first round, go. Don't ever look back. Go. And he, in some ways, it felt like he maybe pushed some guys out the door, on occasion, because you never wanted to regress, because
Sure.
we're costing yourself some money. I think the position change is one of those deals where that's also where the money is that lockdown corner on the outside. I don't know how much money is, at that like interior, semi-interior DB spot. That's kind of a hybrid. So go out there and you want to be able to showcase that you're the second coming of Denzel Ward or Jeff Okudah, and those guys who went out there and look how much money they made the minute they turned pro. So I think that was probably the reasoning behind a little bit of that. But I definitely think he was the victim of being put in a tough spot, and all the the chaos and everything in the off season. But I think in some ways, I think the NFL is starting to move further away from like kind of that fundamental, black and white tape or good tape observation, and putting a little bit more nuance and thought into the idea of development and potential. Not necessarily in the case that like this guy is, we have to let a year for him to work, because, coaching tenures in the NFL are getting shorter. So you want guys to come in and be able to perform right away. But it's the idea of, we have a very specific spot that we want this guy to fill, and we're going to ask him to do these very specific things, and not ask him to do anything that's out of his comfort zone. I think there's a little bit more nuance now to the NFL evaluation process with certain teams and certain coaching staffs that I think benefits a guy like Shaun Wade.
If you're watching live with us, feel free to drop us a comment. And if you have any questions you'd like us to address, we can certainly do that. Otherwise, we'll continue along here with some of the topics that we've got in mind. But one that we shouldn't ignore is basically the fact that National Signing Day is tomorrow. And considering what Ohio State had in the early signing period, I guess back, now just over a month and a half ago, not really expecting a whole lot tomorrow. Rayshawn Davis is basically the only guy that Ohio State fans are really keenly watching. And, it was Ryan Day's comment in his first postseason press conference about, hey, we think we've really only got room for one guy. It was that comment that caught a lot of attention, because Rayshawn Davis was, decommitted from LSU and very much was looking at Ohio State. Took an unofficial visit to campus, I guess now it was about a week and a half ago. And obviously, JT Tuimoloau, the crazy talented defensive end, and in a lot of people's minds, the top-rated defensive player in all of high school football this year. He's based out of the state of Washington, and JT's father recently said that he's not going to announce his commitment until at least April. So I would, and Ohio State right now is heavily considered to be the favorite for Tuimoloau, who has not had a chance to visit Ohio State yet. So the question really becomes, what happens if Rayshawn Davis decides, I want to come to Ohio State? Can he, if the Buckeyes really want to prioritize JTT? They're going to have to do some roster gymnastics to kind of figure that whole thing out. But I would think that if both guys wanted to come, that the coaching staff would try to figure out a way to make that happen. That said, right now, Davis, there's a reasonably good chance he may choose USC and stay out on the West Coast. I know he's got a couple of friends that have chosen to be in their incoming class. So he's really the only guy, and he's supposed to announce his commitment tomorrow morning at 11:30 Eastern. He's really the only guy I think that Ohio State fans are keeping their eye on, and frankly, National Signing Day tomorrow should be fairly quiet.
For the first time in a long time.
Sure.
Right. The roster juggling, and I think we should probably be a bit more specific. When we say roster juggling, what we're really talking about is scholarship juggling.
Right.
And the amount that you can give and how that changes year in and year out. Specifically to guys that you have coming in, from recruiting classes. I don't envy those folks one bit. that to me has to be might be the most stressful part of the recruiting process. It's like we have 5 guys that we think are for sure locks to be hits. We have 2 scholarships. And then you're trying to then rank and prioritize those 5 guys. That has to be, and like, let's say those, like 2 of those 5 guys are playing in the same position. That I don't envy that at all. I would guess that keeps coaches up at night. And there's so much subjectivity that goes into that evaluation process that I also think weighs a lot on the anxiety of it. That because it's not a kind of brick and mortar type feeling, it's more of a gut kind of sense. I think lends a lot to the potential for being uneasy there. It's amazing too how much that's changed in college football the last couple of years with how transfers and the transfer portal affect it, and how that the compliance side of things and and managing those scholarships that is a huge part of all of this and this conversation going forward in recruiting, and I think it's only going to get more and more and more and more important.
So tomorrow is National Signing Day, but yesterday was February 1st, and it was the day that winter workouts officially started for the guys that enrolled early and for the returners. For basically the first time now, the 2021 team was beginning their process as a group, getting started with Coach Marotti, and they got a lot of work to do here in the offseason to try to maximize what they can do in the fall coming up. I think there's an awful lot to consider about this time of year, because as a college football fan, you're a lot of times you're kind of turned off, right? It's February, the season's behind you. In the football world, you've got the Super Bowl coming on Sunday, but this is like the beginning especially for casual football fans. This is kind of the beginning of the time where, out of sight, out of mind, and they sort of circle back to it. But this is such a critical time for developing your program and making sure that you're at peak condition when you get out on the field. In a non-pandemic setting, that's a little easier. You've got some more predictability than what the Buckeyes had this past year. But things started yesterday, and it's a really important time of year for this program, specifically for the 15 guys that early enrolled. which, by the way, that's changed a lot in the last several years, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when Ohio State won the national championship in 2014, I'm pretty sure there were only a couple guys that early enrolled in that class. I think it was only 2. And now, this whole process has changed so dramatically in college football that it's kind of a no-brainer. If you don't early enroll, if you're able to and you choose not to, you're going to be behind. For these 15 kids that of the 21 that have signed an NLI, for them to be on campus, start class, and start going through this now for the next 6-7 months before things really get rolling with the fall, I mean, this is a huge time for them.
I totally agree that the amount of which this period has changed and been re-emphasized is stark in that I think it really kind of shows how much of like a business this college football industry is. I also really like it because I think this is where you figure out who can buy in. This is the coaching staff this is an opportunity where the coaching staff starts to really evaluate the intangibles on a psychological level, because this is not necessarily fun for these guys. I would guess that a lot of what Mick is putting them through is not just, the physical workouts and everything, but there's also a decent amount of psychological pressure. We know how much it's well documented and written about how much Mick employs a lot of the same type of psychological exercises that a lot of the military uses. He's a big, Bud's Navy SEALs fan, if you will, especially when it comes to, kind of the thought processes of training. So this is where they break guys. And if we're going to be really blunt about it, this is where, they start the breaking down process, and then the rebuilding comes a little bit later. And so this is crucial for any of the guys that maybe have some question marks about them coming in, as far as their ability to buy in. This is where you show the coaching staff you're able and capable and willing. You are being evaluated at Ohio State every single second of basically the entire year. I'm not so sure that this period of time is where I would guess the evaluation is even more focused and intense in this period, that they are making sure that they know who they can depend on, and this is where they figure that out. So it's absolutely crucial.
Well, and it's not just important for the early enrolled guys, but especially considering what the last 12 months have looked like.
Yeah.
I think this is critical for the second-year players, for the Jackson Smith and Jigbas and the Julian Flemings of the world, guys that maybe did see the field, or even if they didn't, right? But guys that are going to be relied upon for sure in this upcoming season. There was nothing normal or regular at all about what these guys have been through the last 8 months. And so in some regards, the freshman class of last year, they didn't really know any different. I mean, obviously you understand, hey, look, I'm in the weight room with a mask on. I can't go anywhere without a mask on. I'm getting something shoved up my nose on a daily basis to figure out if I have COVID or not. I guess that normalized fairly quickly. But the idea that, for them, hopefully sooner than later, things are going to start to look a little bit, more normal with the pandemic subsiding a bit. Before the vaccines came out, I think there was a lot of wondering when that would actually happen. And I think now, at least the fact that vaccines have begun distribution, give people a feeling that, hey, at least we're on the back end of this. There is light at the end of the tunnel. There's something tangible that we're working toward. And the hope that the 2021 college football season could look a little bit more like what 2019 did. Maybe not totally, but certainly in some capacity. So for both the incoming freshman class and for the second year guys, I think February and March in particular are critically important for those guys to try and make sure they're ready to rock. And we've already talked about it, Brett, with the quarterback battle. You've got Kyle McCord that is on campus, and he is really not that far behind where CJ Stroud and Jack Miller are, because CJ and Jack had such an odd first year in the program. They hardly saw the field at all. In a lot of ways, it does feel like this is an open quarterback race. So
I wonder how much, and I don't know, quarterback I think is a little bit more nuanced come in this time period. I really wonder how much the evaluation process for Ohio State during this period of time moves guys up and down in the depth chart, because I would guess it happens pretty frequently in that, like, I did not like this guy's attitude today. Boom, we're dropping him. And now, or whatever. And I think that pressure that you're applying here to these guys is all the more multiplied given the outside stressors of COVID and the pandemic and everything. And so I think you have to be in some ways careful, if you're Ohio State, Ryan Day, and the coaching staff, of not maybe giving these guys too much, given all the crap that that we're all dealing with a little bit, especially when we're talking about young men here, 17, 18-year-old guys, 19-year-old men, that, like, you want to be able to give them just enough to be able to grow on that edge of uncomfortable, but not too much to then fall under the weight of expectation, crushed under the weight of expectation. With the quarterbacks, given all of that, I think with quarterback right now, it's really interesting. I would love to be in the room with how they evaluate this period of time with quarterbacks, because I don't know how you do it. I genuinely don't know how you do it, because it's not like, if you're a D lineman, it's like, I picked up a sled and I threw it. It's like, oh, that's great. That's a good thing. You're not doing that if you're a quarterback.
Sure.
And so it's an intangible thing. It's meetings, it's tape. All of that evaluation is so fascinating, because it doesn't have a whole heck of a lot to do with throwing a football right now.
No, I think a lot of it is off the field. You're not in that quarterback room unless you're capable of playing quarterback at this level. I mean, I don't care where you're on the depth chart. You are not a quarterback on Ohio State's roster unless you have a base level of ability, of talent, the ability to play at the college level. The thing that separates you, frankly, I think, is a lot of what you just referenced. It's how you handle yourself in meeting rooms. It's what you do when you're with your teammates in the locker room and you don't think anybody else is watching, right? Just the kind of person that you are and the kind of leader that you are. Because being the quarterback at Ohio State's a big deal, man. It's a heck of a responsibility, and you got to be able to handle it. The Buckeyes have been pretty fortunate the last decade in particular with some extremely talented players that have done so, but maybe nobody more impressive just from a leadership perspective than JT Barrett. I know you could throw Justin Fields in there because of what he did this past year to help bring college football back. But JT Barrett was a three-time captain for a reason, and a guy that Ohio State fans have sort of reserved a special place in their hearts, I think, long-term for him. So I'm interested to see how that quarterback battle shakes out for sure.
Yeah, and it also, to me, it signals the end of, in some ways, it kind of this like crazy run of really like legacy Ohio State quarterbacks. It kind of signals the end of that era a little bit. And now we're into this era of Ryan Day recruiting. Urban Meyer certainly, has a, his influence is still obvious on this group, but I think it's this next batch of full build development QBs. And it's a new era, I think, in some ways. It's different from, the Dwayne Haskins development. It's different from the Joe Burrows, and then Fields coming in as a transfer. That I think is super exciting. And I think if you're an Ohio State football fan, you're eager to see how that looks. And so the next several weeks probably aren't going to give us a great look at how that progression is moving along, but it doesn't mean it's any less interesting. It's certainly going to be fun to watch. I think it might be one of the more anticipated spring games in a long time.
Yeah.
Simply because I would actually put it, it's probably the most anticipated spring game since 2018, when we were curious to see who was going to win the job between Joe Burrow and Dwayne Haskins. And both guys came out and threw like 5 touchdowns apiece and looked entirely equal. And we were all like, we don't know anymore. Like, I was like, oh, we're going to get the answer today. And like everyone walked out of the stadium that day going, yeah, I got nothing. It's flip a coin. And so in that regard, it's probably the most eagerly anticipated spring game quarterback-wise since that year.
Yeah, going to be a lot of fun. Got one more fun topic before we wrap up here, and it was something that came out today, but want to remind everybody that's watching live that this will be archived in its entirety on our YouTube page. Certainly hope you'll subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out everything on BuckeyesNow.com as we continue to cover all things Ohio State football and men's basketball primarily. And that final topic is something that came out this afternoon, and that is that EA Sports announced that there will be a college football video game that's put back out. When? We don't know for sure. They also didn't say when they would say it would come out. It's just in production. So could it be for this upcoming year? I guess we'll wait and see. But I know that certainly created quite a stir on social media today. A lot of people are pretty excited about that. Of course, the last one was NCAA 14, and Michigan quarterback Denard Robinson was on the cover of that game. And that game has given people the ability to update rosters so you can play with a current version of your favorite team. But now we're going to have an entirely new game. EA Sports has partnered with a collegiate licensing agency to make sure that all of the game day traditions and things that they can incorporate in the game are incorporated properly. Really looking forward to seeing, just from like a graphics perspective, about how much technology has changed in the last, 7 years. I can't wait to see how this shakes out. And I hope it comes out soon. And obviously this has everything to do with the name, image, and likeness debate that's gone on for quite a while too.
Yeah. All they did was, throw a couple of 1,000 gallons of lighter fluid onto that fire. Which will be fun. This felt like the trailer for the trailer, kind of.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, Star Wars
really wasn't a trailer. It was just like, hey, here's a tease.
Yeah, it was. Star Wars fans, if they're watching, are nodding furiously, going to that one. This is one of those. I genuinely find the aura around this video game fascinating. Because I didn't play it, and I'm not. And to be fair, I'm not like a video game guy per se. So like, I'm not exactly an authority on this. But to watch in college especially, to watch the fanaticism that came hand in hand with the guys who played this game, to like the insane degree that they did, to see it come back is not surprising at all, because it felt like there was this unbelievably like powerful movement. And it was only a matter of time, maybe some time needed to pass for some collective minds to change about name and likeness for college athletes. But the funniest thing about this to me is the people who played, the men and certainly some women, I'm sure, but mostly men who played this game were like boys / young men when this game was at its height. Now those dudes are like full-blown grown men who probably have families and children and stuff. And to watch them like in however long this will be, to then collectively go into the basement and act like they were 18 again, is going to be genuinely one of the funniest things I've seen. And I cannot wait for those moments. It's going to be absolutely hilarious. Like the guy who takes like Louisiana Lafayette to its 4th straight national championship, running the triple option like that. Like that's going to happen, and someone's going to tweet about it. It's going to be fun. It's for EA Sports business wise, like that is like as much of a win-win situation as you could probably get. It's fascinating, and I kind of can't wait to see all the chaos that it causes too. As I'm someone who has a tendency to be a bit of an iconoclast, and especially specific to college football, like it's like the Chaos Elmo gif, right? Like just like give me all the anarchy that this might cause.
I'm not sure EA ever really wanted it to go away. I think it had everything to do with the name, image, and likeness challenges put forward by the NCAA, and we could do a whole separate podcast on that. The long and short of it is probably within the next year, there's going to be some national legislation instituted. And the NCAA has come out and said several times, we support name, image, and likeness. We just need something at the federal level to help us regulate it, because the worst possible thing would be to have 50 different states with 50 different pieces of legislation. Right. And this becomes totally unregulated, just straight up the Wild West. Which could be fun. Which could be fun, but it'll be just straight chaos. And, for a school like Ohio State, that's probably not going to be a huge deal, because we're talking about one of the biggest national brands in college sports, right? But for some of the smaller Division I schools, or how does this work for a Division III swimmer? I mean, that might not resonate to an Ohio State fan, but it matters to the NCAA to try to make sure they can take care of all those things at one sweeping try. So there is some legislation that's in front of Congress. Obviously, we have a new Congress. Who knows how long this is going to go? But by all indications, it seems like within the next calendar year here, there should be the ability to institute some NIL stuff. And as it pertains to that video game, EA Sports said until there is some legislation passed, they can't use the names of actual players on those teams. Right. They could know that the quarterback at Ohio State is one of the best players in the country and is, jack his stats way up and make him a really good player, but they can't name him Justin Fields. So until the NIL stuff passes, you won't be able to play with the names of those players. But the fact that the video game is in production and is coming out regardless of the legislation process, I think is really important, and is certainly going to be a lot of fun. So
it will be a lot of fun, the connections between government and college football, or college sports in general, has a tendency to go a little crazy. I think, and certainly watching that. We're talking about two glacial entities as far as movement is concerned. Watching them all of a sudden try and push something through will be interesting to see how that turns out. So we're talking about video games, and I was curious about this because I think the hype around this game is quite frankly unbelievable. But I was curious to see where it might rank up or rank with some of the best-selling video games of all time. So I just looked it up. There actually isn't a quote-unquote sports video game in the top 40, or top 25 rather.
Really?
As far as sales is concerned. Minecraft is the best at 200 million plus sales. It goes down. There's a Wii Sports, which probably doesn't count. But it doesn't really go down until you get to FIFA 18, which is number 36 if you're doing this on the basis of sales.
Interesting.
My question to you is, would you expect that this game, when it comes out, to crack, say, like the top 25?
I think over time, I do think it will. Yeah. And I think it has everything to do with the fact that it hasn't been produced for the last 7 years. So I do think it will jump.
It has to do 28 million or better in sales, and we're talking multi-platform here game too. So like that, helps it as well. I think it has to be. You're talking 28 million like new dads out there playing it while they have like a couple kids running around. It's going to be fabulous.
It's going to be a ton of fun. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that for sure. Who would you put on the cover if you're an Ohio State fan? Who would you want on the cover of the game?
All right, so let's say that. All right, so let's operate. We'll have this conversation in two different ways. If the game came out tomorrow, who's on the cover? Okay, if the game came out tomorrow, it's probably Trevor Lawrence.
Okay,
but if they were, here's how I would do it. If I were EA Sports, being Sports Illustrated. Remember how they used to have the previews and they were regional covers?
Sure, right.
Back in the day, like if you're in the Northeast, you got this cover. If you're in the South, I would make regional covers for the games. Now, in your Midwest, it's Justin Fields. If you're down in the southeastern part of the country, boom, you got Trevor Lawrence, or you were fighting a Devontae Smith, right? Like that, I think would be fun, and also like you could maybe get some like random like collector's items in there too.
I think if it's this upcoming season, so Fields is out of the equation because he's gone. If it's the upcoming season, my gut feeling would be Chris Olave. I think you could put Chris Olave on the cover.
Yeah, I think he would be one. See, that's what makes this upcoming college football season so fascinating. Is like who's like that standout star that we're waiting.
Well, I'm talking about from Ohio State specifically.
That's what I'm specifically with Ohio State. It's Chris Olave. But if you look at the big picture of college football, it's like who's that next guy that's like this can't miss, dude who's going to be on the cover of college football, 2021.
Yeah.
Take a guess, man. I really don't even know. I genuinely can't think of a guy that I think would be like a consensus pick for that. That's fascinating, isn't it? I don't know if that's ever happened before.
Yeah, right. For sure. I mean, DJ Uiagalelei probably, is going to end up having a great year at Clemson. I have a hard time thinking he's going to stink, but he's not a household name yet.
Spencer Rattler maybe would be one.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe.
Quarterback.
Yep. Yeah. Fun conjecture for sure.
Yeah. That would it'd be super fun. I think if you're an Ohio State fan, though, it's Chris Olave. 100%. Yeah. Totally agree.
That's where I'm at. All right. Well, we'll wrap up live here for the afternoon. We've been doing this for a little over an hour and certainly enjoyed it.
Our weekly EA college football video game segment here on BuckeyesNow.
Exactly. So for everybody that's been watching, certainly appreciate that. And again, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and hope you'll check things out on BuckeyesNow.com. And we'll have lots of clips from this podcast and some other things posted here on our YouTube channel here shortly. But we'll continue to cover the Buckeyes with a fine-tooth comb. National Signing Day coming tomorrow. Hopefully the Buckeyes will have a normal day. I'm not sure if it's going to be a notable day, but frankly, normal could be pretty quiet considering what they had in the early signing period. For the first time in a long time, that fax machine will not be super busy. That's right. And obviously a huge basketball game on Thursday night. We'll have some reaction for you from that one as well. And we will stream as many of the live press conferences as we can here on our YouTube channel. So hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Thanks, Brett.